My name is Daniel Geschwind. I'm the Chief Executive of the Queensland Tourism Industry Council. In working with the industry, it has been very clear to us that there is a great untapped potential in engaging more effectively between the Indigenous community and the tourism industry of Queensland and indeed Australia. Over the last 3 years, with the financial support of the Queensland Government, we've been able to set up the QTIC Indigenous Employers Champions Network. Through that network, we have engaged with Indigenous people and the tourism industry to achieve better outcomes for all involved. The program has been very successful so far, and we are committed to a long-term outcome, a long-term engagement from QTIC and from the industry. We would like to share some of the stories that we have gathered so far and some of the successes we have achieved so far.
My name's Ernie Grant. I'm an elder of the Jurabal people. They're from Tully up to the tableland up to the town of Herberton, and I got mixed up in the tourist industry when the manager's wife of King Ranch asked me to look at the prospects of making tourism over working on where King Ranch was. And we sat down for about 4.5 hours and worked at what needed to be done. And from there, Echo Creek was born. And I saw it as a wonderful opportunity to give our younger Aboriginal people the knowledge of their culture and a way to portray it properly. And it has worked. The ones that we've got out there have blossomed very much. And for the visitors and the people who come there, it's quite an eye-opener to see how much the Aboriginal people know about the environment, which is probably the best thing for tourism and for people to see the interaction between my people and the area they live in. Out of the 240 languages in Australia, or roughly, each one has its own unique way of saying things, and it got a very human way of telling the story about what life was like in this country over a long period of time. 200 years for Western culture people to be here is nothing compared to the time that we've spent. So the visitors that come to Australia would really like that type of information, and they get very, very interested in hearing us tell our stories in the bush. And the bush as it is now gets a lot of help from people who are interested in protecting the environment, and Aboriginal people are very connected to that particular part of tourism. If you go down to Mission Beach, it's got a sign up on it. What would Mission Beach be without the cassowaries? Well, what would Australia be like without the Aboriginal people? There'd be a big thing missing there. And so this is a good way of not only giving employment to Indigenous people, but also teaching them to maintain and keep the language and culture alive.
One of the things I love about my job is working with all the different people, and from an Indigenous perspective, they're part of the community around us, so bringing them into the business. And from a tourism point of view, international visitors are looking for them. So from a captor perspective, getting local Indigenous people involved in our business is something that the Woodward family has been doing for 35 years. Started with the Pamagira traditional dances, and from that it's grown, and the Woodwards have been very proactive to try and get the local Indigenous people into our company, giving them career paths, and certainly was one of the jobs that I was tasked with when I came on board for Capta. I had worked in remote regions with Indigenous people. So it was very much, for me, a personal challenge and something that I enjoy working with them. They bring some really unique things to our business. Their sense of family, their cultures, their sense of humour. They're often very shy. So letting people see them as people and understanding who they are and sharing their sense of humour, their stories into the business grows the business, but it also is an amazing experience for our staff as well. That cultural diversity is a real strength, and I think it's been one of the strengths for CAPTA. We've now got 16% Indigenous, so in 5 years we've gone from about 6% to 16%, and that's something that we're very, very proud of. It's been a real journey, learning how to do that. One of the things that did happen about 4 years ago when I started, was we got an Indigenous mentor. So she's very much part of the team from HR. She visits the work sites, she engages with the Indigenous staff, but she also engages with our non-Indigenous staff. So she's a great resource to mentor and assist, but she brings that cultural connection, and she's certainly been somebody that's been very important for our development, but also growing the Indigenous staff and our other staff to understand each other, sharing their cultures, knowing the people around them, has given them insight and understanding. It's broken a lot of barriers, and that's been difficult at times. Understanding what sorry business is, understanding the commitments to family that they have, has been an education for all our staff, but it's also made us aware of our own families and our responsibilities, and that's been excellent. We are a family business, so those cultures align really well, and I think it's one of the strengths of CAPTA that we have done well, is those family values are the basis of our culture, and in tourism that's certainly been an asset for it. Looking back in hindsight, what could we have changed? Looking back, it's so easy to see that we could have done an Indigenous mentor 20 years ago. We could have got out into the communities instead of waiting for them to come to us. We could have been out there building those relationships instead of just focusing on our business, thinking they'll come to us. So I guess the biggest challenge we faced was actually leaving our comfort zone, going out into those communities, going to NAIDOC Day, seeing what's happening in those communities, what's happening in the schools, how can we engage those people and find our employees of the future. We could have done that a lot sooner, but I think we do it well now, and we've learnt from those lessons, and it's all about relationships, building trust, letting people know who you are, and when you do that, you grow your business.
Hi, I'm John from River Life Mirrabooka.
And I'm Shannon from River Life Mirrabooka also.
Now, River Life is down on the edge of the Brisbane River in southeast Queensland. We started River Life up in 2005, and it was all about leisure and recreational activities on the river, and we wanted something a little bit more, something that could interact with culture, heritage and Aboriginal people.
So we approached John over time, and we met and had several meetings, developed a relationship, and we developed a concept called River Life Mirrabooka in conjunction with both businesses. River Life already had significance to the Aboriginal people because we live off the river, we do our hunting and different things, boating and that also on the river. The Mirrabooka part comes from Mount Cootha here in Brisbane.
When I first heard from Shannon and Eddie and the whole family, that I knew instantly I had a great business partner. They were able to clearly and concisely talk about Aboriginal issues and have the audience intrigued. I've always found that having Indigenous people tell their stories is so much more passion, and people take notice. They stop and they take notice. So I've been thinking about it over a long period of time, how we can enhance things down at River Life and how we can make things more appealing for Indigenous people who work for us. And what I've really worked out is you really need to just treat people with respect, and you've got to understand what the needs of the young boys or the young girls are when they come to you. And if you can respect what their needs are, and if it can work in with your business, and it has, it's worked really well. So that way I find that you can have a win-win situation, and it works out for both companies.
Well, hello, my name is Karen Buchanan. My language name is Gungard. I've been doing tour guiding here for 6 years. I work at the Mossman Gorge Dreamtime Tours. This area here is very important to me because this is where my family grew up, and my family is one of the main traditional owners of this area, and that's why I feel special to this place. So I started off doing traineeship 6 years ago, and I really enjoyed it till I started having a hard time and started having family too as well. So, and yeah, family members passed on, and that was really hard on me. And I can remember one part I thought about walking away from the traineeship. But with a lot of help from people like Penny, Jackie and Kerry, they really pushed me along, and they really wanted to see me finish the traineeship. And yeah, well, without them I probably wouldn't have passed, finished the test. But yeah, I ended up finishing it, and here I am today. Well, the future in tourism for me, I reckon I'll be in for a long time, and like especially with me being the youngest one here out of all of us, I think I have a long way to go, and probably one day I will be the senior guide and teaching all the younger ones. The future for us, with our gateway coming up down the centre here, it's pretty good for our young generation, and hopefully with my children growing up, one day I'd like to see them growing and working in those areas as well. So for Indigenous people out there, I would like to say is visitors come to Australia to learn about Australian culture, and they come to learn about our culture as well. And that's one thing we all got a good advantage on, because all Indigenous people of the land, we all know how to survive off our own country, we all know how to live off their own country, and that's where we can explain to visitors how we lived off the land. And that's one thing that's one thing I think about when I'm doing tour guiding, is give us the opportunity to explain to visitors how Aboriginal people lived off the land.
I'm Odin Thompson. I work at the Sofitel in Broadbeach on the Gold Coast. I'm a room attendant there at the moment. Only been there about 2.5 months. It's really good, it's going well, loving it. I initially started out in the hospitality industry in the kitchen, back of house, in my early 20s. Enjoyed that, but chefing and cooking are two completely different things. Hospitality for me isn't just an industry, it's a word. People like to be in your hospitality if you're doing a good job, especially. They like being around you. They like being in the environment that you create for them, whether that's to do with food or a room that you've just created for them before they get there. Attention to detail, the small things count, I think. Whether it be a little bit of dust on a wine bottle or a crease in a bed, people do notice that sort of stuff. There are streets that I can take now, and I think that I'm well on my way to doing that, to grow, especially within the Sofitel, where they seem to appreciate me. I appreciate them a lot for what they have given me too. Confidence is a big thing, I think, for potential employers as well. Realise the potential. I think there's a certain stereotype around Indigenous people that may not always be fair, but I think can sometimes be justified as well. I think it comes down to the individual and how they take pride in their work. It doesn't really necessarily have to come from where they've come from or where they've been.
I do love the tourism industry. I'm so passionate about what we do. Because we are specifically focused with Indigenous tourism, I get the opportunity to showcase our culture to the world, to Australia and the world, and there's nothing more passionate than doing that. My recommendation to all you young Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people out there, if you are looking for a career, then I would highly recommend looking at the tourism industry. It has a world of diversity. You're not stuck to one job. You can do a variety of jobs within the tourism industry. You are in a better position than what I was when I was at school. You have so many resources to look into the tourism industry before you even start down that track of becoming employed in the industry. At school, for example, you have your counsellors, you have guidance officers, you have career counsellors that can give you an idea or a foundation to look at the tourism industry. You have career expos. I think the best one for Indigenous people is the FOGS Expo. You know, go ahead, take the lead, get out there and have a look at what's available. If you're really keen to work within the tourism industry, I believe that within the school now, they've brought tourism in as a subject that you can study. That's even a first way to get into the industry.
Culturally, and from a marketing point of view, Indigenous Australia plays a very important part in the tourism industry. Unfortunately, we haven't been very successful in bringing that Indigenous component into the tourism industry and, for that matter, to our visitors. It is very important for us as an industry to bring more Indigenous people into mainstream tourism and to connect them more effectively with our industry and, for that matter, with our visitors. The QTIC program has gone a long way in activating that interest in the Indigenous community and also in bringing the employers to the table to give them more effective tools and more knowledge in working with Indigenous people as staff and potentially as future entrepreneurs themselves. We have been able to engage with literally thousands of people over the last 3 years across Queensland, potential employees, young Indigenous people who look for a career, who look for a future for themselves and their families, and they realise increasingly that there are opportunities in tourism. We want to bring realism to that. We want to bring knowledge to that so that Indigenous people who take a step into tourism and look for a career in tourism go into this with realistic expectations. And we want to help employers to engage with those Indigenous people on the basis of knowledge of the needs of the Indigenous people, knowledge of the opportunities and the strengths they can bring to a tourism business. We have, over the last 3 years, been able to place more than 110 Indigenous people in mainstream tourism businesses, and we continue to support both the employers and the employees in making sure that employment sticks. It's not a short-term project, it's not a short-term initiative, it's something that will require long-term engagement from all parties, including QTIC, including the network support that we've been able to generate. We believe in a strong future for tourism in Queensland. We have all the ingredients to make a success of this a long way into the future. We have the natural attributes, the natural assets, from the Great Barrier Reef to the outback. We have the cultural significance that we can show visitors. We have the infrastructure in many cases that we can use to build a very strong industry. We also have an Indigenous community that can help us achieve those objectives and in the process benefit themselves from a great future. We urge employers to use the resources that we have been able to assemble through this project. We urge them to learn from what others have already experienced and build on that. We don't have to go back to square one all the time. We have come a long way. Let's make sure we can build on the experience that has been gathered so far, including through this project here today. I also urge Indigenous people to seriously consider how they could make a career, make a future through tourism. There are opportunities. It is not a pot of gold waiting at the end of the rainbow. It's hard work that's involved, but it's a significant future that can be built on tourism in this state. I also want to, so far, thank everybody who's been involved in this project. It's been hard work for everybody, but I think a great success. And as the stories you've heard tell you, a great success for many individuals and many, many communities. Please stay with us. I thank the Queensland Government for the support they have offered us. I thank the employers who have shown their commitment, and I thank the Indigenous people who've worked with us in a field that's a bit novel for some of them, but it has achieved a lot. So thank you to everybody, and let's work together for the future.